I think when I found Bitcoin, I was just like, this resonates. This is human. This is right. It's enriched me with the people in this space. It fills me with so much hope because there are a lot of beautiful, generous, intelligent people out there that are working for the good of the network, and it's an honor to know them and to be challenged by them and to think with them. And maybe they're from a different religion or a different country or just different than my experience growing up, and we're all just coming together to celebrate this freedom technology.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Kristine Cranley to the podcast. Kristine is a Bitcoin educator and a mining investor. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Kristine.
Thank you so much, Paula. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's great to chat with you today. Before we get to Bitcoin, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am an educator by heart. And when I found out about Bitcoin, I dropped what I was doing and started educating on it full time. I created an LLC called Noah's Bitcoin in honor of Noah's Ark, escape the flood of inflation. So, because I'm one of these people, I can't not talk about what I'm excited about. And I think for most of us that are in the Bitcoin space, the more you start researching macroeconomics and what's going on with the monetary supply and our debt and the hope that sound money brings, that Bitcoin brings, you kind of can't not talk about it. So in 2021, I got in this space. I started teaching on it. And then along the way, a registered investment advisor firm here in Texas, which was one of only a few in Texas that allowed for Bitcoin access, called me up, invited me to sit for my Series 65 and join the firm, helping educate some of our higher net worth clients about Bitcoin, particularly Bitcoin adjacent opportunities such as Bitcoin mining. I've been in the financial services, but mostly focused on Bitcoin for the last several years. And then in the last year, my business partner and I, we let go of our financial licenses because all we wanted to do was talk about Bitcoin. So it enabled us to both focus on some of our mining projects within the space. So that's a little bit about what I do, but my first love is educating on Bitcoin. And, to the people that come and ask me, should I invest in mining or should I just buy Bitcoin? Usually the answer is buy Bitcoin if you don't have Bitcoin. And then, we could talk about mining later, but you really have to get off zero because it's, in my opinion, it's the most asymmetrical bet of our lifetime.
I've heard that twice today, so I believe you. You know, it's amazing that you let go of your financial license. That took a long time to get, right?
Yes, but it's so hard because, for my business partner and myself both, we've been in the space a long time. Both of us were in the space before we got into the financial services space. And we did allow with the RIA firm before we let it go, we were helping people get their IRAs into Bitcoin, real Bitcoin, and custodying it. With BitGo was the custodian we used, also working with Equity Trust so that people could actually own Bitcoin in their IRAs. But now with there's other options. We don't have to pay so much to have someone hold it. And if it's not stuck in an IRA, we're just both such advocates of holding it yourself and getting it off the exchange. Yeah, so it just was kind of like, well, this is where our heart is, and this is where more and more people knew us to be doing these kind of projects. So yeah, we just let the traditional finance go so that we could focus on our first love.
I admire that. And once you find Bitcoin, I mean, I'm the same. I'm ready to let it all go, but it takes a little bit of courage to do that.
Indeed.
Tell us about your Bitcoin journey.
As I mentioned, I first started learning about it in early 2021 and started. It's amazing what you can learn on Twitter. Well, now X. I was on Reddit too, looking at things like silver. I find silver very interesting, but also the Bitcoin community and them taking me down the path of the creature of Jekyll Island. And it's just so amazing how pervasive the financial system is, how much it affects, but that we never think about it. It's like a fish swimming in water or us breathing air. You so rarely think about what's surrounding you. But the more that my eyes were opened, and why 2% inflation, right? That's just kind of the monetary expansion that they can get away with, but it's stealing 2% a year, and now more obviously. Like I said, the more that I studied it and learned, again, I loved from Jekyll Island and Safedeen's book, and just more and more on Bitcoin. I started attending some conferences, was blessed to be a part of the first beef initiative conference, where I just participated in it, where people were connecting with ranchers to help them understand Bitcoin, but also connecting people with ranchers so that you could buy beef with Bitcoin, and promoting the circular economy. So, yeah, it's just kind of one of those journeys I'm sure we've all been on. You get a little bit here and you meet new people. I found the Bitcoin meetups are some of the most interesting people. The people at the meetups are some of the most interesting people in the world. I think it doesn't matter what age they are, what their race is, what country they're from, they're paying attention, they're thinking deeply about the world. They all tend to kind of lean libertarian, no matter where they are in the political spectrum. But it's just the most amazing conversations and the most amazing people that I've ever met in my life. Yes, I've been at it for a little while now and wouldn't trade a day of it. And I'm so grateful for all the amazing people that I meet along the way.
Yeah, I agree. Bitcoiners are amazing. Your tagline on X is fix the money, fix the world. When did you realize there was a problem with the money?
Well, again, it was in learning about Bitcoin in 2021, kind of helped me see a solution. But before that, in my past, I have done a lot of pro bono work, helping women who find themselves in a crisis pregnancy and just trying to figure out what to do in this situation. And a lot of the women that I've worked with, when you really get them talking about what do you really want to choose, if everything else in your life was different, what would you choose for yourself? They always say, I want to give life to my child. But the father of the baby may be pressuring them, her parents are going to kick her out, her school is kicking her out, like if she's maybe in a parochial school, or her job is making her leave. And it always came down to money. If she had all the money that she needed and the emotional support, she would always want to choose life in that situation. And so it just really struck me how crippled we are when we're just on this hamster wheel, gasping for breath, gasping for air, always trying to just live paycheck by paycheck, make it to the next month. And the more that I studied Bitcoin, I started to realize, when money is printed as it is and the monetary supply increases, it's the people that own assets that their assets go up in value. But the people that are living paycheck to paycheck, it just gets harder and harder and no relief. And so you could talk about saving money to invest for a house, but for more and more people, you can't reach that because the inflation is going way faster than the paychecks are. And so people are feeling more and more despair about that. Whereas with Bitcoin, you can just invest $1 a week even and have your savings go up. And it also educates you on a different way of life, because I think when you have no hope, you have no hope to ever own a house, or you have no hope to make your life better, oftentimes you make decisions based on just like, live for today, what else do I have? Whereas if you have that mentality that if I put this away, it's going to grow in time, then maybe you skip that coffee in the morning or that Starbucks coffee and you make your own, or you make just different decisions because you have this hope that I have this nest egg. And if I don't spend it, then it's going to grow in time rather than just melt in its purchasing power.
Yeah, so many good points there. I have spoken to so many people who say Bitcoin gives them hope. And in order to get there, though, you do need conviction.
Yes.
So that takes time for some people. But
Yes.
but once they have that, then Bitcoin is one of the best assets that we can own. Like you said, you can buy a very small fraction every week, day, month, rather than buy a whole big house.
Yes. And hopefully one day you will be able to afford that house. If you're saving in Bitcoin rather than dollars and you hold it long enough, because as you say, the volatility can be very scary and you never want to put next month's rent money in Bitcoin because you don't know what it's going to do short time term. But as people like yourself, myself, the educators out there are just continuing to walk people through the way the cycle usually works, the reason that Bitcoin goes up, the scarce supply, and then you have that conviction to hold for a time period. I love hearing the stories of people that were able to purchase property or things that they thought would never be possible were made possible because of this asset.
Yes. Yeah, speaking of educators, you make incredible videos. The one that was retweeted by Michael Saylor, just a short video, but you explain it so well in such a short period of time.
Thank you very much. It
Yeah.
was a lot of fun to put that together.
Is that what you do? Create videos like that to educate?
That one took me quite a while because I really wanted to distill what is my argument, what's the value proposition of Bitcoin. And so just it took me quite a while to cull it down to make it as concise as possible, and then I did all the animation myself. I'm sure with AI you could probably whip things together much quicker, but that one was a bit of a labor of love that took a little while. And I also did a second one that Sailor retweeted first. Actually, it's underneath on my X post, just a 2 minute long of what is stranded gas Bitcoin mining. But after that, I ended up getting so busy with just the stuff that I was doing with the investors that were looking to invest in the mining space that I haven't really gone back to making more videos. So yeah, I do love doing it, but life has gotten so busy. I haven't done a whole lot. I do some speaking at different different events and educate that way, but I haven't done any more than those two particular ones that you referenced.
Yeah, well, they're great. So the political landscape regarding Bitcoin is heating up. We have a potential Bitcoin strategic reserve coming. Tell us a little bit about this because you do post quite a lot about what's going on in the political arena.
Yes, very exciting things going on here. I have to say, when I first got into Bitcoin, I never imagined a world where you'd have an administration so blatantly supportive of our space. So, some of the things here in the US that I'm most excited about, I do think that the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, which was part of President Trump's promises to the Nashville conference, I got to hear him speak there. I do think it's very much on the table. There was a picture of Michael Saylor with Trump's son Eric meeting at Mar-a-Lago. I heard Eric Trump speak at the Bitcoin conference in the Middle East. It almost sounded like he was quoting Saylor verbatim. Clearly had a lot of conversations. They've been friends for 30 years. So I do believe that the Trump administration understands the possibilities that are inherent in this idea of not just holding the coins that we already have, but buying more. I also think that President Trump is a businessman and he knows that it would be foolish to talk it up before you actually are doing it. So, there was a press conference yesterday with the crypto czar and everyone was hoping he'd say something about the Bitcoin strategic reserve. Somebody did ask him about it at the end and everybody got these big smiles on their faces, but they're like, well, that's the first thing we're supposed to look at. So they're looking together. We've got Cynthia Lummis, who's been the biggest advocate of not just holding Bitcoin but buying more, which of course, if the US signaled that this was going to be a part of our strategy going forward, then the rest of the world is going to have to start buying in order to catch up. So I think that there's a very, very good possibility that that does come to pass because from what I've seen from President Trump, he loves to do what he said and then brag about having done what he said. So I can't really see a world where it doesn't come to pass. But the interesting thing that's now come up is, in addition to the strategic Bitcoin reserve, whether that just be holding the coins we have, because the US has, we had 200,000 Bitcoin from the Silk Road and places where we had seized it, but Lummis is proposing buying more. But in addition, they just announced that they want to do a sovereign wealth fund. And so that would be the US investing in certain assets and letting those assets grow and work for the American people. Well, the two people that are in charge of that sovereign wealth fund, separate from the strategic Bitcoin reserve, are the new Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent, and the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick. Bessent is very pro Bitcoin. He said that everything's on the table with Bitcoin. But Lutnick is a major Bitcoin bull. He's a Bitcoin billionaire. When he was at Cantor Fitzgerald, they helped Tether get their treasury settled. There was always a question about, does Tether have all the backing that they say they have? Well, Lutnick, under their leadership, they started buying treasuries, but also using the interest to buy Bitcoin and to buy gold. So this is the mind that is now in charge of the sovereign wealth fund. So between those 2 points, I think that there's a very good chance that when the time is right and the US is ready to announce it, we are going to be making Bitcoin a part of our national strategy. I mean, even just things like, I don't know if you follow Jason Lowery, but he has written much on the strategic um, defense importance of leading on Bitcoin. And just yesterday, or this morning maybe, he put out a tweet saying, there's times when you get tapped on your shoulder and asked to use your specific gifts to kind of change the world. And so he seems to be hinting that he's been tapped for something. So I think it's a very exciting time, and I'm just enjoying the ride.
Yeah, I heard about that too. It is amazing. Just the one thing that I would say is, with the US government, obviously run on fiat, and we have a high deficit, in the long run, they're most likely going to have to print money. Sure, the Bitcoin reserve will slow things down, plus they're cutting expenses. All of that is good. But do you think it's enough for how our debt based system is headed?
So I think that's a great question. I think that this is the crux of the problem that Trump and his administration have to figure out. Because as Lynn Alden always says, nothing stops this train. And as Larry Lepard says in his new book, the big print is coming. There's no way out of this other than inflation. And one of my favorite macroeconomic thinkers is Luke Gromen. I don't know if you follow him, but he wasn't a Bitcoiner at first, but he just kind of has been reading the signs of the times. And he's been arguing, there's no way out of this other than inflation at the beginning. And then we have to get down our debt. But as long as we're basically, so to speak, taking out credit cards to pay our credit cards, we're in a spiral. And so how do we solve this? And so I heard Luke Gromen talking about a comment that was made on a podcast during the Bitcoin conference. Peter McCormick, on his What Bitcoin Did podcast, was mentioning that he was talking to a friend of his who was a Bitcoiner whose dad is very famous. And the friend had been trying to convince his famous dad to buy Bitcoin for years, and his dad never would. But apparently, Trump called this famous person and said Bitcoin is the new oil. Supposedly, allegedly, this man bought Bitcoin. So Luke Roman was thinking about that, and he was thinking about the time when, in order to reset the economy, the powers that be, I guess, just decided they were going to let oil revalue. So it like went up 10x in a span of years. And so the people in the know were kind of telling each other, buy in now because we're telling you it's going to revalue. So Luke Grauman was thinking about, how do we get out of this situation that we're in right now with all this debt that we have? Obviously, anytime you have more inflation, food prices go up. If you let oil go up higher and higher and higher, then the price of food is going to go up. The price of shipping is going to go up. You're really going to feel the pinch of inflation. If you let gold revalue, which I think probably will happen, the central banks are hoarding it. The U.S. has called in all our gold reserves. It seems like we're calling in a lot from the COMEX right now. So the price of gold is going up because everybody seems to be wanting to prepare themselves for a revaluing of gold, because currently the U.S. still values gold at, I think, $42 an ounce. So when it gets revalued, hey, we're going to have a whole lot of assets to back our reserves. But everybody else around the world has been hoarding gold at the same time. So Russia, China, India. So when gold revalues, US isn't necessarily the superpower. It just depends on who's got the most gold at that point. But Luke Gromen says, and this is the line of thinking that the whole Bitcoin is the new oil led him to, if you let Bitcoin revalue, so if the US has more Bitcoin than everyone else, and they're piling it up in the background, and then all of a sudden you start letting everyone know, hey, you go ahead and settle in gold, but Bitcoin, maybe we make you pay your tariffs in Bitcoin. The guy in charge of tariffs is Howard Lutnick. But if you let Bitcoin revalue, one, you bring a lot of wealth to the United States because most of the Bitcoin holders are here, but you don't hurt anyone the same way that they would be hurt if oil revalued, because you're not going to necessarily take the price of food up so much because, they say, well, Bitcoin, what's it used for? I mean, we know what it's used for. It's decentralized money, but it's not a commodity, right? So it's not necessarily going to jack the price of food up the same way. So I say this because I don't know what the president's going to do. I don't know what his team is advising him. But this was the first time that I saw a light at the head of the tunnel, because I've heard him say twice now, what I'd like is to pay off our national debt with a little bit of Bitcoin, with a little bit of crypto. But he has also said, you never sell your Bitcoin. Cynthia Lummis has said, we're going to hold this Bitcoin for 20 years. But the point is, I think that he definitely is considering revaluing Bitcoin as a part of his national strategy to attack this very real problem with the debt. And then the last thing that I'll point out about all this, because again, this is coming from Luke Gromen, who's paying a lot of attention to Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. To say that you want to strengthen the dollar system and keep the dollar as the world reserve currency is not the same thing as keeping the dollar strong, because the stronger the dollar is compared to every other currency, the more the rest of the world suffers because they have a lot of dollar denominated debt. So what they end up doing is selling our treasuries, and the interest rate on the treasury starts going up and up. And so then people can't get loans and everything gets harder and harder to purchase over here. Now, sorry, one last thing about all this. There's so many interesting things, but the most important thing right now is that the biggest purchaser of US treasuries right now happens to be Tether and stablecoins. And so if Trump and their team does move forward with this idea that we're going to let Bitcoin revalue, well, suddenly you have the rest of the world who don't have dollars. They're going to be buying stablecoins to purchase the dollar value of Bitcoin. And now you have a new demand for our treasuries. Now you bring the interest rates down, because mortgage rates are not dependent on the Fed. They're actually dependent on the 10-year treasury. So it's a solution that doesn't mean there won't be pain along the way, but it's an actual real solution to offset our debt with real world assets and possibly bring the interest rates down in the midst of this situation that seems like there is no solution.
That is very interesting and very well said. I appreciate that. What do you think the pain is?
I think that there is inflation in the short term. I don't know how you get housing prices down, because if Bitcoin revalues and now everybody has a little more money, then that causes inflation, because inflation is a result of more money chasing lesser goods. Some of the things I'm hearing the administration may be doing to bring housing prices down, they're selling all the government buildings and building apartments. They're talking about creating new cities from parks that used to be parks in the US to try and increase the supply in order to bring the prices down. I just don't know what they're planning. I don't know how you get out of this other than, as Larry Lepard would say, the big print. And so you have to have gold or Bitcoin. Obviously, I'm a Bitcoiner, but you've got to have something that is outside of that system that can go up faster than the inflation goes up. So that's what I suspect the pain is, but it remains to be seen.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly why we're educating, right? To try to get people to get at least learn about Bitcoin and possibly use it as a hedge for what could be coming.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about mining because that's your expertise. Tell us a little bit about how it works.
Okay, well, so mining, everybody likes to give a hard time because they say it uses too much energy. But the thing about Bitcoin is the energy usage is a feature, not a bug, because all that power going into the Bitcoin network keeps it secure, right? So it's impossible for me to go back and change a transaction that I sent to you because that transaction is put in the blockchain. It's distributed to every copy of the blockchain in the world, in space, if Elon sent it up there. And so, in order to go back and erase that transaction, you'd have to have a mining computer that's faster than every computer in the world for all time, which is impossible, right? So, and that's because of the way that the mechanics work. So, what Bitcoin mining is doing is they're taking the transactions. I sent you some Bitcoin, you sent it to your friend, and they're adding it to the blockchain using a hashing algorithm. They're basically scrambling up data, putting it through a blender called SHA-256, and they're creating outputs that are 64 characters long. So A793 letters and numbers. And they're looking for an output that starts with a certain number of zeros. The number of zeros depends on the numbers of computers mining at a particular time because the system adjusts so that it only wants a new block once every 10 minutes, approximately. So those computers are competing with each other to find the new block with the hash that starts with the right amount of zeros and then publishes it to the whole network. And the whole network can say, oh, that one fits. That's right. So now we're going to start building on the longer chain. And so it's this brilliant technology that overcame the double spend problem, right? If I send you some money and then I send it somewhere else before your check cashes, then that's the problem that's why things have to wait to settle. But Satoshi figured out this answer. And so the mining uses a lot of energy, and that is on purpose. So when you're investing in mining, the one with the cheapest cost of power is the most profitable. But what I think a lot of people don't understand is Bitcoin mining is not it's not easy. Like there's so many new computers coming online competing that unless the price goes up very quickly such that it takes a while for more computers to come online, then oftentimes you're just barely breaking even. So I think I checked today, the average price to mine Bitcoin is about $83,000. So what that means is the miners that are able to use energy sources that don't cost them a lot of money, they're going to be more profitable. And during times when Bitcoin price is very low for a long time, they remain profitable while other miners come offline because they're spending more money than they're making in the mining. And so in the end, it balances itself out because when they drop offline, then it gets easier to mine Bitcoin and more profitable. But you just continue along the way with the system getting bigger and bigger and bigger with more and more competition. So what it does is it requires that miners be very creative in their energy sources, especially given the fact that AI is now coming online and stealing or they're buying up every ounce of available power at any price. Like they don't have to get cheap prices because they're profitable no matter what. So all these power contracts that Bitcoin miners were getting, maybe 5 cent power, 4 cent power, it's harder and harder, I believe, in the future to find that, which is going to necessitate Bitcoin miners being more creative with how they get energy. And so that's kind of the field that I focus on with some of the investments I'm involved is we use wasted natural gas. So when you're drilling for oil, gas is often a byproduct, but if there's no pipeline built out to that area, it's just thrown away. There's nothing you can do with it. So that's why you see the flares in the desert. That's why they're always burning. They're just throwing it away. But Bitcoin miners can come out to the wellhead in what looks like a shipping container. It's a data box, and they take a generator that turns natural gas into power, and they can mine Bitcoin that way at a very, very low cost of energy because they're basically just buying power that nobody else wants. So, as one of my friends likes to say, Ben Harper of Canada, we're basically selling power on the internet. So, power that would normally have no other taker, we're able to sell it on the internet by turning it into Bitcoin.
So, you are looking for wasted energy, and what makes a project profitable would be the lowest cost of energy.
That's correct.
And also good mining facility.
Yes, the lowest cost of energy, and then also buying the equipment at the right time in the cycle so that your return on investment doesn't take so long to recover those costs. Because the thing to know about Bitcoin mining, it's shifting a little bit now, but in the past, there's only been two companies that will sell Bitcoin mining computers. Both of them are in China. So Bitmain and WhatsMiner, MicroBT. Those are the two companies that sell Bitcoin mining computers. In the last cycle where Bitcoin ran up in 20 and 21, when Bitcoin went up, the cost for the mining computers 10x'd that because there was no other competition. There's no way to bring it down because those two companies were able to dictate, no, we're going to charge you 10 times as much because we can, because you can't go anywhere else. Now, there is a company, Ordean, that's working to create computers here in the US, but it's still an issue where right now, it's even though Bitcoin's close to an all-time high, profitability is not so high. But if we get our strategic Bitcoin reserve, if Bitcoin's price goes running up, the world comes FOMOing in, the price of the computers will most likely go up exponentially. It's a tricky thing to time the investment such that you're online before that run up happens, because not only do the price of computers go up, now everybody in the world wants to be mining too, and there's all this money that's being thrown at the space, but you kind of missed it. So now is a very good time to be building. And then hopefully, if the price continues to go up, then we'll be on the ship when it takes off. But if not, then eventually those other computers that are expecting that will come offline. And so the ones with the low cost of power will stay profitable. And hopefully it'll even itself out and get a little more profitable at that time. If either the price of Bitcoin goes up or the other miners give up and have less competition for those of us who remain.
So even though, as Jeff Booth says, that technology is deflationary, the cost of those miners are going up.
That's correct. Yep. And part of that is because the chips are getting smaller. When I first started mining, we were at like 7 nanometer chips. The newest ones, we're putting a project online today, actually, and we've got 3 nanometer chips. And so the old computers, it's hard for them to keep up. So you're investing in the newer equipment, which costs more money because you're going to be putting more chips inside. And again, unless you are able to flood the market with a whole bunch of computers to bring the price down, right now we're really limited by the fact that the only place you can really get the chips are in Taiwan or China. And so that could be a supply crunch issue as well. The tariffs are probably going to hit all of that unless Trump does what he says, and find some way to incentivize Bitcoin mining and shield it from some of those taxes. Or, you're going to have to get more US companies to provide that. So to Jeff Booth's point, if we had enough supply that was easily accessible, then fair market, it should go down. The truth is, you've got more and more people competing, so you're going to have to use more and more power to stay competitive. And we have some supply chain issues if we can't bring some of that manufacturing here to the US. But the thing is that the technology to create the chips we do not have here in the US, and anyone that says that it's coming, it's going to be a couple years yet. So that's part of the rub on why it can be so expensive to get into the space.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned AI. Is it a threat to Bitcoin mining?
No, I don't believe so at all. It's a threat to the large, low power contracts. But one of the important things about Bitcoin mining is it doesn't have the same needs that AI needs. So, AI, you can't have a program go down in an emergency or in a power outage. So, they need data centers that have duplicate power. So, if one power source goes out, they've got the generators that are going to turn back on. They also need very fast internet connections. So they have to have fiber built out to their data centers. And they can pay any price. So Bitcoin, on the other hand, they can turn off in a moment. It doesn't hurt their product at all. And they can go anywhere. They only need cellular access. They don't need fiber to transmit their data. In Texas, what that means is the Bitcoin miners, whenever there's a storm and there's a need for power, in Texas, we have a free market for energy. So if there's a shortage of supply, the price goes up. But Bitcoin miners will go offline, they'll turn off. That might be because they're selling their price of power back. Maybe they have 4-cent power, but they're going to sell it back to the grid when the grid needs it. Or maybe it's just become too expensive to mine because the price has spiked up, so they turn off. So because of that, Texas Bitcoin miners are actually bringing the price of power down for Texans. They're making the grid more stable. When China kicked out all its mining, a lot of the miners came to Texas. And since that time, we haven't had the same grid issues that we had in 2021. So, because of that, you actually really do want Bitcoin mining around in a way that if you want a strong grid, if you want low power prices. So, a lot of Bitcoin miners are doing a little bit of both, or they're being asked by their shareholders to look at doing a little bit of both because there's this idea that AI is so profitable. From what I understand, it is profitable, but the capex, the amount of money that goes into building it out, is exorbitant. Whereas Bitcoin mining, it doesn't cost that much to put online. And you do have that flexibility, that you could sell back to the grid or turn off if your power price went up. So I don't think it's threatened. I think that it's synergistic. And I just read today that there was some AI hackathon experiment where they had the AIs transacting in Bitcoin with each other. So I think that more and more, as people understand the asset class, there's going to be so much more demand for it. And I do think the price is going to go up eventually. I mean, it's up, but it's not why I'm in it for the price. I mean, I believe in the asset. I just think it's such a beautiful decentralized solution. It is nice when the price goes up, especially when you're mining and trying to keep up. But I do think that we are still early in the S curve of understanding and adoption of it. And I don't think that AI is a threat to it at all.
Yeah. So, how has Bitcoin changed you?
Oh, that's a great question. How has Bitcoin changed me? I would say Bitcoin itself, it was more of a recognition of so many of the values that I have found in this technology. So it wasn't that I was necessarily different, but there was just such a resonance of decentralized, right? And empowering the individual, and just the whole idea of the nodes, Bitcoin, who is Satoshi, who is the Bitcoin network? It's all these individuals out there participating. We're all Satoshi, as they say. And I've always had that vision that every one of us is a gift from God that brings a unique blessing to the world. And every life is precious because we are enriched by one another. And so I think when I found Bitcoin, I was just like, this this resonates, this is human, this is right. But I think the way that it's changed me is it's enriched me with the people in the space. So, in a lot of the travel that I've done, a lot of the people that I've met, it fills me with so much hope because there are a lot of beautiful, generous, intelligent people out there that are working for the good of the network, and it's an honor to know them and to be challenged by them and to think with them. And maybe they're from a different religion or a different country or just different than my experience growing up, and yet together we see the same thing, and we are mutually enriched and grow through the sharing of minds and the meeting of one another in this forum where we're all just coming together to celebrate this freedom technology.
Yeah, I love that. That's really cool. And I think, yes, there are always going to be people that get in earlier, and it's never going to be a completely even world, but it gives the opportunity for everybody to get in, be decentralized, not have your money printed. And that's something we all resonate with.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you tell your friends or colleagues whether to invest in Bitcoin or mining?
Oh, that's a good question. I usually tell them that it's best to just buy Bitcoin regularly. Don't worry about the price. Do not plan on selling, at least not for many years. I think that's the best place for everybody to start. And there's this funny thing about Bitcoin is that, Bitcoin mining, we mine because we expect the price of Bitcoin to go up. And so even if we're only barely profitable now, we're hoping that Bitcoin that we hold will go up in the future. But there's always this trade-off of, for an investor who's looking to invest in Bitcoin mining versus purchasing that amount of Bitcoin. You almost always do better if you just purchase that amount of Bitcoin. You're going to have to be mining for a long time for it to break even. Now, that being said, there are definitely advantages to investing in the mining space. First and foremost, there's tax advantages. So for us, we're on oil fields, so we have oil field equipment, and so we can get accelerated depreciation. So if you're looking for a tax write-off, you can write off almost the entire investment. So that's helpful, if you're going to have to pay that much in taxes, but now you don't. So that's helpful. Also, there's ways to invest in the infrastructure where you're now hosting another Bitcoin miner. So you're just looking for cash flow. And they're basically paying you rent for your spot. So that a lot of investors like that because maybe it's a 20%, 30% return for the next 5 years. It's not volatile like Bitcoin is, but it's a steady return, a way to kind of move out of your day job and shift to passive income if you have enough of those passive income investments. And then finally, just with the way that the cycles go, we have a lot of people right now looking to buy some of our old projects. So if you want to flip it really quickly, well, it depends on where you are in the cycle, but there is the potential maybe to double your money even if you build it at the right time. And then when it starts running up and everybody wants in yesterday, then you can give it back to them at a certain return on capital. But the projects that I work on, they're for accredited investors. So people that already have a significant amount of wealth. But again, I tell everybody, you're not missing out because your best play is just to buy Bitcoin regularly, hodl it, don't worry about price. But for people that have already done that and they're interested in investing in the infrastructure, and that's where we get into the mining conversations.
So, just on that note, you are expecting, at least in this cycle, that we continue to move up with all the good news possibly coming.
Yes, past performance is never a guarantee of future. So obviously, I don't know what the price is going to do. I don't know what it's going to do short term, but I think it's the most asymmetrical bet of our lifetime. I think it is such a beautiful, necessary technology. It answers so many of our issues that we didn't even know we had. If you look at what Doge is doing right now and looking at all the ways their money is being wasted, and then you have this decentralized option. Would you really be willing to go to war if you had to let go of your country's Bitcoin, which you're never getting back because there's not enough of it to go around? How many things would it actually fix? So, yes, I'm very bullish on it. My personal belief is a lot of the stuff with the Trump administration is not yet priced in. I think a lot of people, for whatever reason, they don't think he's going to do what he says he's going to do. But I've been watching President Trump for a long time. He seems to love to do what he says he was going to do, and then remind you that he did what he said he was going to do. So I'm very hopeful for our space, and it's just a lot of fun to be here for the ride.
Well, tell us where people can find you.
You can find me on X, Kristine Cranley. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm not really on much of the other platforms, honestly. I'm on X all the time, but that's probably the best way to find me. You could DM me or reach out on LinkedIn.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a lot of fun.
It was an honor. Thank you, Paula.